My name is Courtney Jordan, and I'll be filling in for Eric Steinborn today. We're also recording today's meeting if you'd like to check it out later. So, some really cool news. Tom Atkins, would you stand for us? We have to hear Tom. Tom, who was part of Tom was part of New York State ITS WebNY, made a Drupal 8 core commit. So let's give him a round of applause because that's pretty awesome. So Tom participated in mentored sprints on Friday in New Orleans after DrupalCon. So if you go to DrupalCon, you too can be like Tom. You could have the chance to be a core contributor and have your name go down in history. So awesome. Another cool piece of news, our very own Greg Marshall, who's part of New York State ITS WebNY, wrote a really cool book on mastering Drupal 8 views. We have some really cool cards up front and on the side, and we can provide information in a follow-up email if you'd like to find out some more information. It's called Mastering Drupal 8 Views, and it's really cool, so check it out. So, for this month, we have two awesome presenters. Jeff, is it Geralt? Geralt and Meredith Case. Jeff is a technical lead for the Office of New York State Controller, and he'll be starting us off with Drupal Beginner's Corner. And then followed by Meredith Case, who is a designer and developer for the New York State ITS at WebNY, and she'll be sharing an intro to Drupal 8 theming. So without further ado, here's Jeff.
Good morning. I have the wonderful privilege of kind of starting us off talking about Drupal from the very beginning. At a beginner's level, I was asked to kind of assume that we know nothing, although I know we're all Drupal lords and lordettes in here, but I'm going to start as if we know nothing. And one of the reasons we decided to, I have Patrick McMahon here with me also. He's assisting me over at the office. We're going to be working on implementing Drupal at our office. Currently, we have a website that's put together like how traditional websites have been put together, a file system with a lot of markup, HTML files, CSS, JavaScript, images, PDFs, spreadsheets, and it's been constructed the traditional way that you would expect sites to be constructed, but we have the unique challenge of having to manage different divisions that have different needs, serving different audiences, which I'm pretty sure is probably not too far different than a lot of you in here. So we've decided managing a site would be better if we managed it in a content management system. So at our office, what we did was we evaluated three systems, Drupal, WordPress, and Joomla, and I'm sure there's tons of content management systems out there, free, open source, what have you, but we decided to try those three. And at the end of our evaluation, we saw that Drupal was by far the best fit for what we needed for it to do. And we also saw that a lot in government entities, the White House being one of them, Australia, I think most of you heard, a lot of government entities and cities, states, countries have went the direction of Drupal, and it seems to be the lead candidate for a content management system in that regard. So we found that to be the same case. We found that Drupal was the most robust of the three that we tested. In terms of security is up to par, and functionality, interoperability, all those things that we were looking for, that's with Drupal, and so we made that recommendation, and that's what we're going to be moving forward with. So we are currently working with Acquia to help us get Drupal up and running. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of Acquia, but Acquia is a company that is pretty much primarily specialized in Drupal everything, getting you a Drupal instance up and running. They provide support. Cloud servers, they have a cloud platform that they utilize. They have as an option, so you don't necessarily have to have your infrastructure in your entity. And we currently are. So with that, I'm going to kind of start off with the Drupal basics. We're going to assume that that you've already installed Drupal. I have a fresh Drupal install that I downloaded last night that we can start with the presentation. One of the things about a content management system is that it allows you to have many different people working on one system. It allows you to manage all your content under one umbrella, which is nice. And in terms of maintaining the actual system, it's you maintain it in one place and it's applicable to the entire application. So you're not constantly worried about if this is up to date, if that's up to date, different artifacts, different scripts, or within your site. It's all under one roof. I found the best way for me, and that's probably the direction we're still going to talk about Acquia, but for us to get Drupal up and running, we decided to go to Acquia's Dev Desktop. And what Dev Desktop is a service that allows you to, in order to run a Drupal application, and it's the same thing with Joomla, WordPress, or many of the applications that you would be running, you need a standard suite. You need a MyApache server, and you need a PHP database, as well as the actual application itself.
Apache, MySQL, and PHP.
So with those things, you would be able to get a Drupal instance up and running, but you would have to actually get those things. There's many different ways to get it. There's companies and services out there that lets you download WAMP stacks or MAMP stacks if you're using Mac. But I found
LAMP if you're using Unix or Linux.
Right. I found since I'm using a Windows machine, Dev Desktop 2 worked best for me. So I downloaded Dev Desktop 2. When you download Dev Desktop, it actually comes with the PHP and the database all set up for you. And upon launching it, it'll initialize the server. As you can see right here, that green light indicates that that's running, and so is my database. So the one thing I've found that I like about Dev Desktop 2 is you can actually manage your Drupal instance all in one place. If I want to get to my application instance, it's a one-clickable link right there. If I want to get to my file system, same deal. I have a link that allows me to tap into my file system, which is a little bit more advanced than we're going to get into this session. But I can if I want to. So to get started, we'll start with actually getting to the application by clicking that URL, and that will take me to my Drupal instance. Now, when you first download Drupal, there is some setup and configuration necessary, but we're going to assume that we've done that, and here we are with my fresh Drupal instance. Now, with this content management system, one of the things that I appreciate about most content management systems, but more so with Drupal, much of what you're going to be doing and looking for is right above here. In your dashboard, you have all these options here that are pretty straightforward and intuitive, and it'll tell you, it'll get you to most of what you're trying to do within the application.
Now, as of right now, he's currently logged in. That toolbar at the top is not visible logged in.
And I'll show you that now.
So this is a default instance of Drupal with the user not logged in.
So that's what you would see. And for purposes of, there's times where you may or may not have the URL available, but a good rule of thumb to remember is the slash question mark equals user.
That's if you don't have safe, clean URLs set up on your server. If it's clean URL set up, it would just be /user.
If not, you would
then you'd have to use the question mark.
So that's just a way to access the login screen. If you ever lose it, if you ever need to get to it, this is the way you log in.
And it's question mark Q equals user.
All right, so I just logged in. I'm a user. I'm going to assume that, within this application, of course, there's going to be many different types of users. We're going to simulate the just an everyday content provider wanting to create a basic page, publish that page, and have it viewable by the public. There's a few other things that we'll demonstrate in here as well, but one of the things that we're trying to key in here is how easy it is to accomplish basic everyday tasks within a content management system like Drupal, as opposed to the standard way of doing it, where you need to know some level of markup, HTML, some level of CSS. And in today's world with dynamic websites, you would need to probably have some idea of how to use scripts and leverage some libraries and APIs. But within a system like Drupal, it doesn't necessarily require you to be a coder or a developer. You can actually do things that you would necessarily be able to do, like create a page and publish it, and do things like implement certain APIs, libraries like social media, so, like this, search functionality, analytics. All those things can be easily integrated within the application without much coding.
Which, by the way, search is already built in by default into Drupal.
So we're going to say, all right, I'm a content provider. Titles can vary, but I'm a content provider. I'm somebody in the agency that needs to provide some kind of content to our application, to our website. So I would log in there as my user, and then I would look up over here, and I would click content, which will bring up that screen. And within here, we would, again, the biggest thing here is a lot of things are pretty straightforward. It's very intuitive. I found other applications may be more or less intuitive. I found Drupal to be pretty straightforward. One of the misnomers, I think, when we're going into Drupal, people are saying, oh, you need to be a rocket scientist or a hardcore Java developer to be able to manage a Drupal site. I didn't find that to be the case. I found that basic, if you've ever used a word processor like Microsoft Word, there's things you can do within Drupal. So we're going to do the content here. I would come to this menu, then I would click this link here that says Add Content, and then it'll give us options here. Now, by default, Drupal, a fresh installation of Drupal is only going to come with those two content types, and we'll get into a little bit more of the content types in a little bit. But you can add different kind of content types to meet your needs. Drupal doesn't assume anything. It doesn't assume that you're going to build a website, a blog. It just gives you a basic framework to accomplish the task or that you want to accomplish. So
that's also why they state on the website that Drupal is a content management framework.
Right. As opposed to
content
system like WordPress or Drupal. So right now, we're going to utilize the two core content types that Drupal comes with. I will start with just assuming that we want to create a basic page. It's as simple as clicking that link there. Then it brings up this screen, and this allows you to start adding and editing content. Now, again, a fresh instance of Drupal will not come with this toolbar. What I had to do is I went to go get a plugin called CK Editor. And CK Editor is a standard editor that allows you to have these options up here to be able to massage your content, just like you would do in Microsoft Word. So by default, it doesn't come with the CK Editor. I will show you how I got the CK Editor here, but just for time purposes, I already had it here. I would add a title. This title, we'll call it.
This is the edit screen for a content type. Depending on the fields that were defined for that particular content type that you're creating, those fields would be on this page.
And so that title is the title of this particular basic page. And then I would go and add content, which I currently don't have, so I'll go get some. All right, so I just added some basic content. Why not have two paragraphs? But again, this is no different, very similar, I would say, to using Microsoft Word. I just grabbed content from a website or some generator or whatever, and I copied and pasted that right into the body section of that editor. And again, like just like in Word, I can do things like bold, text. I can italicize things if I need, italicize things, and it does recognize things like.
It does recognize short keys.
Short keys. That was a storm. So again, I can do basic editing. I can same things you would see in Microsoft Word. If I wanted to add an image, I can go into here and use a URL to add the image, or I can use my image uploader. There are little things like positioning. You can paste in plain text there, just a regular paste. I can look at the source and look at it. Some people are more comfortable looking at it from the markup standpoint. You can see you have your paragraph tags, your strong tags around the word dummy, and so now we're looking at it from a plain text standpoint. I click here, and it'll bring me right back to the editor as it was prior to that standpoint. So I add my content there, however much I want to add, and I will then proceed to seeing what I do after my content is added and I'm comfortable with what I have. I have my title, I have my content, if I want an image, whatever the case is. Now we want to know about publishing options. And again, there's many different options that we'll quickly look at over here, but we're trying to get to the core functions of creating a page. Now, by default, this checkbox will be checked, which is published, which means when I go down here and save it, this particular page will have a title and that content, and it will be published. If I don't want that default behavior, I would uncheck this box. I would save it. Then it would be in a state where we'd be able to look at it, but it's not viewable by anybody else except for us or whoever or the authenticated user, whoever has the right permissions. So for the purposes of this demonstration, I will say that we'll publish it. I can preview it as well. I'll do a quick preview. It's not going to be anything pretty, but as we can see, we have our title, text 1, 2, 3. We have our content. We see some basic formatting.
You'll also notice that there's two versions of it. There's the trimmed version and the full version. The trimmed version is typically used for when it's in a list format, and then the full version is once you've selected that item, it demonstrates the full article. These are the default states of a current type of field, which is the content with trimmed content data type, where it's a text field, but it also has a trimmed format. You can also edit. You can also edit your summary by clicking on the blue Edit Summary link, and you can manually override the default option for the trimmed version of your content type. So now, if he previews it, the trimmed version will look like the edit summary that he just put in.
So again, we're pretty much just modifying content. I think. So we just create a basic page for lack of more exciting purposes. Now, when I went, I'll show you how I did that actually. So again, when I clicked out of that menu that you just saw, I have my options still visible over here. When I click back on content, I'll see all the content that's been created in a list right here. Now, right now we only have one page. If I created another page, you'd see it in this list right here. But what this row allows you to do is actually look at the page. If I click it, it gets to the page itself.
And you can edit it right from the tab.
Simply by that tab, I had access to the editor right where the content is, and I'm right back to being able to modify this in any way that I want. The other thing you'll see is that in this row here, it tells you the type of content that it is, so we know that it's a basic page. We can see who created the page, the author of the page. We can also see the status, which is important. You can see if it's published, the state of the page, or the actual type of content. In this case, is a basic page. The last time it was updated, and then you have your column here, which is operations, which allows you to either delete the content that you just created, which we don't want to do, or we can edit it, which often you may want to do. And clicking the edit button takes you right back to the editor. So that's our basic page.
And you'll see on the screen here as well, the first column at the top is your filters. You'll be able those, and by using your filters, you can find exactly the content that you need to work on. Right? The second column is your bulk operations or update options. This is where you can select a bunch of different content by checking the checkbox on the left side of the content and then using a bulk operation. A lot of times it's publishing, unpublishing, deleting, and many other items that you would need to do on any content pieces at the same time.
You can also have, there's another tab over here, quickly go into, if you were allowing comments, this is where you would manage your comments for that particular content that you create. Now, often, we're not going to have, we don't see a need for that ourselves, but your entities may see a need for comments. We'd rather not have that field visible, so we're going to disable that for ourselves. That's the basic way of creating content. Again, we only had two content types here when we wanted to add content. We only had a basic page and an article. Articles would be the same, relatively the same thing. We'd have a title field. Now, because it's an article, we can add tags to it. We can get into tagging if we wanted to. If we had an article about fiscal stress, which is something that Cindy would appreciate that. We can hashtag, we can put a hash here, tag it, and have that comma separated so we can have more than one tag over here. We can add content here with our basic editor to do the same thing. We can add media, we can format, we can find things, center, right, so forth and so on. Just like we saw with the basic page.
And the tags don't need hashes, but you can if you wanted to.
Now, before we move on to the next thing, does anybody have any questions on just basic page, creating a basic page, editing it, publishing it, formatting? No, we'll just continue and keep going. Okay. So, next thing that we're going to move into is how simple it is to create a user, manage a user, look at roles and permissions within a framework like this. Again, within in a traditional standpoint, if you have a site like we have it now, roles and permissions are managed in many different ways. But within a content management system, it's in one place. There's a button here, a link here that says people, which is pretty intuitive. You would think that that's where you would go to manage users. So we click there's up our screen here where we can now add a user or manage a user.
And much like the content page, you also have three sections here: the filter section, the bulk operations section, and the list of users.
So right now we have one user. Again, I just downloaded this instance of Drupal last night, so I'm viewing a user in the system. If I wanted to manage myself, I would click edit. What I can do here is I have a username that I can edit, password, email, change a password here. I can change the status, whether I'm an active user or blocked user for some reason. If you need to block a user, do that. I can manage my roles, whether I'm an authenticated user or an administrator, and I can add a picture so that when I'm logged in, I can see my profile picture if that's something that you would like. That's an option you have.
And under the roles section, it's going to list every role that you've defined. The Drupal instance does come by default with those two different roles, but you can make other roles as we will be demonstrating shortly here.
So I'm going to click out of here and just kind of go back to the basic creation of a user. I'll go up here top left, click on people, and then if I want to add a user, I will come in here and I click add user. Very intuitive, very straightforward. And this is all out of the box, Drupal 4, nothing special going on here. I clicked on add user, and what this allows me to do now is to add a user. So I'll give that user a name. I'll give I would have that user's email address. I'll use my email address for the purpose of the demonstration. I would set up a default password, something that you don't care too much about, that you can give every user or however many users you have, that they can change later. So for the purpose of the demonstration, very secure password. And then the nice thing about Drupal is it's caught up. This Drupal, I forget which version they started doing this, but they have a bar here where you can actually see the strength of your password. I'm sure many of you use online applications, seen this a million times before, but Drupal does that, and it also tells you to verify that your password's matched, so you're not really having to think whether it does or not. Again, I can go and when I'm adding this user, I can have it as an active user or a blocked user. Being that I'm creating a brand new user, I would have that user active, and then I can assign this user a role. Authenticated user, I can make this user an administrator, which would give them administrator rights. I can make this, I can notify the user.
And a user can be part of multiple roles.
Yeah, you can have more than one role. And by clicking this link here, it'll say notify the user that there's an account. So by having that option on, the user will get an email saying that Drupal has created a user account for you, and they'll give you your credentials. And inside of that email, there will be a link that'll let you click and access your Drupal instance, so you can log in, change your password, and proceed with doing what you need to in the system. Now, again, there's some options up here. As Patrick alluded to earlier, this will get me back to all the list of users, and this will show me the permissions, which we'll get to in a little bit. So I've already went through the whole thing of adding myself, and that's why you see Jeff Terrell here. So we're going to kind of skip over and going back to edit. I'm going to assume that I went in my email, I clicked the link, I went back into the system, changed my password, and here I am. Now, in here we have some shortcuts. You can do some things here, create a new set, or choose a default set of shortcuts to use. Right now, I'm just leaving that as is.
This is more advanced stuff.
But this is more, yeah, this is kind of getting further into user management options.
These are just more personal configurations. At this moment in time, basically, you would only need to focus on creating users, editing users, and permissions.
Now, this screen here lets you manage permissions. You have three columns here to your right. You have an anonymous user, you have your authenticated user, and you have an administrator user. Those are the three types of users that Drupal comes with by default. You can add different kinds of users as you see. As you go down these columns here, you can talk about some of these things. You'll see what you're allowing your users to do by looking at the column and then the corresponding rows. So if we want to see what a particular user can do for a block, or for within a CK editor, commenting, or contextual links, so forth and so on. We have our dashboard. There's just different things that a user can or cannot do within a system, and by checking or unchecking these options in these columns as they correspond to these rows, you'll be able to give or take away permissions for type of
For a role.
for a role. There's things you can do with nodes. I mean, there's tons of options here that you may or may not want a role to have, but all that is managed here. And if we added a different type of role, we would see another column here for that role, and then you could manage that permission for that particular role, just the same way, all within one place.
Along with, as you add content types, there will be new options in your permission list that will allow you to give those permissions to a particular role. For instance, if you created a custom content type called test, then you would have options for creating test content, editing test content, deleting test content, along with also editing, deleting, and viewing of content that other users have created. So for every content type you've created, you'll also have correlating content type permissions.
So that's pretty much user management, roles and permissions. Again, it's managed pretty simply.
I'll also show them how to make a role.
Oh, let's go into that. All right. So
if you select the permissions tab, and you'll see a subsection of permissions and roles. If you select roles, you'll now have the option, a list of all the current existing roles. To create a new role, you simply give it a name and hit Add Role. You'll notice on the left side there's a 4-directional arrow on each item. You can click and drag them up and down to change their order, and then hitting Save Order will save that change. If you want to just edit that particular role, you can hit Edit Role, which will bring us back to the permissions. Back to this page to change the name of it. And then you can save those changes if you wanted to say roles or role 1. And then if you hit Edit Permissions, this will bring you back to the Permissions tab, but it will only list that role, so you can edit that one with the other ones available to you.
So again, I could just click and check these boxes, say, all right, I want test role 1 to have, access to blogs, CK editor, so forth and so on.
And so if you go back to just if you click on permissions, again, it should give you all of your roles. And so as you create more roles, you'll have them listed here, and you can see what roles have certain specific permissions, and you can cross-reference them based on the other roles and permissions.
But again, we just created we created a custom role, test role 1. It required we didn't do any back-end programming. It required a couple of clicks of a button. We managed it in one place under people. We had different tabs, permissions, which has these two options in here, roles, permissions, that allows you to actually access the roles that you created and manage it all in one place.
And when you edit a user now, that role will actually show up in your list of roles that you can assign to that user.
So that's a quick overview on roles, permissions, users. Any questions there, or keep rolling on? At any time, if anybody has any questions, just stop me. I'm just going to keep rolling. I'm very comfortable with the back and forth. So now we're going to, so we just looked at how to create basic content. Now, we saw that we only had, by default, 2 content types that Drupal comes with, an article or basic page, but we often know that there's much more types of content that we're going to be utilizing in our everyday jobs, and we may see that we need new or additional content types. So we're going to show you guys how to do that. Right here we have a section called Structure. Now, structure is much more than just creating content types. There's there about blocks, there's views, and that's much more advanced stuff that we're not going to get into here.
Defines the structure of your site.
Right. So under here, you see an option here called Content Types. And under Content Types, we can click that, and we have an option here to add a content type. Now, right now, you can see that we have the 2 default content types that Drupal comes with, article and a basic page. And one common theme, or one common thread you'll see here with all these different options, whether it be managing content, managing a user, doing something within our structure, Drupal has this interface that allows you to see what you're doing, and it puts things in rows, like in a table format where you have your columns and rows. Your row will be, will specify the thing that you're doing. It'll give you options to edit that thing that you're doing, basic operations for that particular thing. It's a common theme. It's a common way to keep things easy and easy to find, easy to navigate through. I found that to be very useful learning Drupal and getting up to speed. So we're going to add a new content type by clicking Add Content Type. We can give that content type a name. That name will appear when you look at it. We can give it a description. And as we scroll down, we'll see that there's many more options that we can associate with type of content. For instance, we can give this title field a label. Right now, I'll just leave it for all purposes. I'll just leave it as title. We have preview before submitting options. That's optional. You can disable that. You can make it required. but that's all within this option tool right here, submissions from settings. You have publishing options, you have display options, commenting, menu settings.
So here you'll have your different publishing options. You can make it by default the publish checked at the time that you start making content, promote to front page. When that is checked, it allows your content to be displayed on the front page once it's saved and published. And then stick to top, you can have multiple content types listed on the front page. Stick to top pushes it to the higher level. It would basically give it a lighter weight, which brings it to the top of the list. And create new revision. If you have that checked, it will automatically create a revision every time you hit save.
You have display settings.
That is just to display the author, date that it was created, stuff like that. Most of the time, you're probably going to uncheck that because unless you're at a news site, you're not going to want that information being shown on every page.
We have a comment setting, which we probably won't have that.
Comments, that just gives you comments at the bottom of a content type, allows users to interact with the content.
And menu.
Everything here will add the content to a menu, which under structure you can create new menus, and you can then assign that content to a menu by default. If you want, for instance, test content to always be added to the main menu, you would have the main menu checkbox checked, and you can even define a subsection of main menu in the drop-down below.
So then when we're happy with our select, we click on Save Content Type, or we can click on Save and Add Fields.
Which is more likely.
Which is more likely what you're going to do. You probably want to manage your fields for that particular content type, so in that case, we're going to say Save and Add Fields.
By default, the content type always has a title, but does not have any fields. And it has a body, but you can also delete that. You cannot delete the title.
So we see the fields that we have for this particular type of content. Right now, I'm under the Manage Fields tab. You'll see there's other tabs here available with different options. Right now, we're going to look at the Manage Fields tab. We have a title, we have a body by default. We can add a new field,
Text field or something. So you give the field a name, which also automatically generates a system name for that field. And you'll see the machine name right next to it, which is called field_text. And you can also edit that if you wanted to, but typically you don't have to, because usually your name is going to be detailed enough that the machine name will work.
and you have a type that you can associate with the field.
Future modules and stuff can also extend your options for different content types. So if you're not happy with the content types you have, you can just simply go onto Drupal.org and download modules that extend this.
So I made it a text field. There's an associated widget for text fields.
Each content field has a list of widgets that you can select. For instance, media fields and file fields will have different kinds of widgets for file uploaders and other different options for filling in that field. It's basically the interaction with the user.
So then when you're happy with your options here, after you managed your fields and you gave it a name, you would click Save. Assuming you're happy with the way you manage your display, we'll make it to that before this is over. But for the purposes of saving that, we have another option. Since I selected a text field, it's going to ask me if I want a maximum length, standard 255. I'll say that's fine.
And each field type has different options and configurations. A text field is fairly simple, so it only has one option, which is a maximum length, but other fields will have other different configuration options.
So now I say Save Field Settings, and I save the settings on the fields. Now remember, I didn't save this before, so now I'm going to save it now. And now we have our.
I want to go back to edit that field. There's also some default options that you have for every field, which is how you can configure the location of your label for your field. You can also have options for having text in the field, specifically for text fields. If you want to have kind of a guide to the user of how to use that field or what information needs to go into that field. Just go to Manage Fields. Hit Edit. So here you have size of the text field. That's going to be, in this situation, it'll be the width. You can have helpful text, which will show up as the alt information. So if you mouse over the field, it'll give you a little clue as to what you should be doing with the field. You could also check the box of required field. It makes it a required field, and the form the content type form will not allow you to go further unless that field has been entered. Default text value. Any field can have a default value. Even image fields can have a default image. So you can set up default values for these things. You can also, for text processing, we have it currently set for plain text, but you can also have it as filtered text, and other modules also extend that further, full text or even PHP.
So then we would save our settings. So we're going to assume that we're happy with everything.
That last option, right, go back, there was actually one more option. For fields where you would want to have multiple instances of data being entered in, we currently have a number of values entered as one, but you can have unlimited. You can define a certain number of times that you want someone to be able to enter in that field. So if you had a text field and you want them to have, you have a maximum of 2 times that they can enter into the field. At 2, and what will happen is that field, after they entered it in, will give a new field underneath it and allow you to enter another value into it.
So then we saved all our settings and our options. Then, as you can see now, we created a new content. We go back to content, and when we want to add content, we'll now see content type available in a list of content types here. So now we can use that content type however we see fit.
And that content type, when you go into it, you'll notice that new text field that we just entered.
So we just covered content. The content option will show you how to create new pages, basic article, or your own custom content type. We covered people, roles and users, how to add a user, how to manage their roles, how to manage their permissions. And with the little bit of time that we have, we're going to quickly just fly through some other things you may or may not need to know when you're just getting up and running with Drupal. Under the appearance section, here's where you have your themes and your theme settings. Right now, we have our Bartik 7. These are the default themes that Drupal comes with. They're not really fancy. They're not anything special. You can have as many themes here as you want. These are some disabled fields in this section. Neither one of these are disabled are enabled. If we wanted to enable them, they're as easy as clicking this link, enable, or we can enable it and set it to our default theme. Same thing with Stark or any theme that we may have in our list here. If I had 3 other themes here, you would see it listed here. We could do the same thing, enable or disable it, control the description of it, and so forth and so on.
And if you can scroll to the bottom there, you'll notice a option at the very bottom here. This is how you set your administrator theme. Everything we're looking at right now is through the 7 theme. So if you wanted to maybe switch that to Stark, hit save. And now we're using Stark. If you want to switch it to like Bartik or something, it'll be blue. And actually, if we go to, just to make it so it's more noticeable, if you go to modules, and this is a recommendation also to disable certain content type, certain modules here. There's going to be see it says overlay. And now we've gotten rid of the annoying overlay, which is a resource-intensive object. You don't need it. So now, as you can see, instead of it hovering over our website, it takes up the entire page.
But essentially, this is in terms of our themes, where we want to manage our themes, which themes we want to use, the themes we want as our default themes. Essentially, again, so intuitive, it's so easy to use. You just click appearance, and that'll take you to where you would manage your themes. And again, there's within each theme, there are some settings you can manage. I'll quickly show you this. There's little things like background color. Um,
And every theme has its own configuration settings.
Display things you can have. Well, you can toggle displays, whether you want your logo to show or not, site name, so forth and so on. And you can save that configuration, and that would be applied to that particular appearance for that theme that you just assign that to. Again, this is where you would do your theme management. There's more advanced stuff that you can do here, but that'll be for another presentation.
Set the administrator thing back to 7, just so that we can continue with a similar look and feel for everyone.
Another thing you may want to, that you may or may, depending on your role, you may or may not want to do, you may find the need to extend Drupal's core functionality. You may find a need to do that Drupal doesn't currently have. So that may require you to go get a module or a plugin. Where you would do that is this option here, modules, will bring up this screen here. This will show you all the modules that you currently have. These are all Drupal's core modules, everything except for my CK editor, which I added last night. Last night I found that I needed to extend the core functions because I didn't have an editor when I was modifying my content. So I went to Drupal.org.
First link. No.
First link. So I'm on Drupal.org, as you can see. The quickest way to do this, there's many different ways. You can actually download the module, have it on your file system, and then upload it to your system, or you can just go down to the actual section here. I'll right-click on the tar here. I'll say copy link address. Then I'll go back to my Drupal instance. There's an option over here that says install new modules. I'll click that link. I can right-click in that box right there and paste the link that I just copied from the Drupal. And I click install. It would go there and unzip it, install it, and then I'm not going to do it now because I already did it, but then you would see your newly installed module inside of your module section down here. Then to enable it, you just simply click this checkbox here to enable it so that you can actually then use it. That would be the same with just about any module you would find out there. There's social media things you may want to use, analytics tools that you can use. There's lots of libraries and APIs that you can leverage to integrate with Drupal, which is another one of the great things that I found with Drupal. There's almost nothing that it can't handle. We found it to meet all of our needs. Things that it didn't come with before, we were able to find it in a module or plugin. And last but not least, the other thing that may be important when you're coming to a Drupal site is this is some of the advanced stuff, but this is your configuration section options here. The important thing to know here is site information. If you wanted to go in here and change the name of your site, give it a custom name, you would do that here. You can give your site a slogan if you choose to, a default email address. You can have a number of posts. In this case, we're just set to 10, but we can change that number and have a number of posts on a page, on a front page to whatever number you find there.
As we said before, when you're assigning content to the front page, you can define how many content types, how many pieces of content are listed before they drop off the bottom of the list. So by defining 10, the maximum amount is 10 on the front page, and the 11th one will not show up.
And if we wanted to have, if we had a particular node or page that we wanted to make our front page, we can make it, force it to be the front page by adding that node here. I had one node once, I put that there, and that's going to be the page that appears in the front every time somebody goes to the home page. You can also have error pages. You can assign those error pages. If you have them, you can assign them here, and that's where they would, you can say no, whatever, go and save. I'm not going to save anything here because I like the default configuration. But those options are available in site information. One thing that we also often have to do when if you've done something like you created a basic page and you don't see something, or there's a performance issue and you're not quite sure what's going on, the quickest troubleshoot mechanism that I found was to go to performance and clear your cache. Clearing your cache flushes things out and kind of gets things back in order, and that's usually like my first rule of thumb. If something's not going right, I go and clear my cache, and that's how you do it there. And then if things are still not working here, then you got to go through the rigmarole troubleshooting, looking at why you were having that particular issue.
Drupal automatically caches all templates, so they're faster to load when you put in a request. So that's why when you're developing, you'll want to clear the cache because you'll be seeing the last compiled version of your templates every single time. So once you've cleared the cache, it'll recompile those templates for whatever the recent code is that you've implemented.
So this in configuration, there's way more other options. There's things about your user interface that you can manage. Development, you can manage. You can have your site under maintenance mode if you'd like to, so people can't see that particular system. You can have another page in the front while you're in maintenance mode if you'd like to manage it there. There's a ton of options here. Some of them more advanced. Some of them, maybe a site administrator would do, or advanced developer, or what have you. But all those options in terms of configuration, your site information, are going to be found under configuration, or most of them. And with that, I will stop for questions. Cindy?
Jeff, when you were adding all those fields, it seemed like a real easy way to set up a database. And so if you set up a database, this is a MySQL database, do you access it outside of Drupal, all that data?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty, because it just seems like a real handy tool to quickly get a database up quickly. And
What it's actually doing in the back end is it's establishing it has a table called fields, and every time you define a field, it defines that field in the fields table. And then you can actually have once you've created a field, you can assign it to multiple content types. We didn't actually get into that, but when you're in the add new fields, there's actually a second option in there where you can add an existing field. So once you've created a custom field, you can also reuse it in other content types.
oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
So you just, as doing database work, that's a really, really nice tool.
Lots of people actually utilize Drupal as their back end for a front-end application. For instance, if you're making a mobile application, you can make it so that Drupal, instead of providing a page to a request, it can actually provide things like JSON or XML. And so you can actually use Drupal as your graphical user interface to manage your data on the back end for some custom application in the front end.
And again, one of the things I mentioned at the beginning is I installed Acquia Dev Desktop 2 in order to manage Drupal instance. I have a hook into my actual Drupal instance, which we were just looking at for our demonstration. I can also, and I'll quickly just show you this, I can access the site structure. And this is the back end of Drupal. This is more advanced stuff. We're not going to get into any of this stuff now, but this is where our themes are managed. This is where our site, we have site information, we have modules, we have things like that. They encourage you, if you're going to do anything in here, they encourage you to make a copy. Always make a copy of your theme, work off the copy, make a copy of the site, work off the site copy, never work in the actual default one.
This is Drupal 7, so everything you'll be doing is actually under the sites folder. You won't be editing anything outside of the sites folder because that is technically core. And the rule of thumb with Drupal is do not.
And the reason I came back over here to Dev Desktop 2 is to also show you that you can actually manage your database.
Oh, cool.
Come right in here, and your database is right here for you. Again, I would stress that this is more, advanced stuff, But again, if you need to do something, a basic database query, cut something, drop a table, or which I suggest you don't do.
You don't want to.
You can do all that here. You can also do backups here and see your backups. But you have with Dev Desktop 2, I found that to be very, very useful. That I can just go to one place and with one click of a button access what I want. The backend system, the actual application or the database. All of it.
And if you are editing the database, it is recommended to just use Drush.
Oh, I wanted to get into Drush today. Eric strongly suggested that I didn't.
Very advanced. So.
Yeah, and from what I understand, he covered it last month, I think, or whatever the case is. I would say this, Drush is very, very useful. We won't get into it today, but it's a handy tool that lets you do a lot of what you just saw me doing on the application end. I could have did a lot of that through a command line tool like Drush. I could have managed my user. I can do things like site updates. I can do cron jobs all within one place with Drush. If you're more familiar with command line, then Drush is an option that you would want to utilize. With that, I will conclude this beginner's presentation. I wish I can get to some of the more advanced stuff, but maybe another time.
I have a question for you. So, seems like you guys already have an old website. Now you guys migrating to Drupal.
Yes.
So when you take your old website and migrate to Drupal, what's the procedure you guys taking to, clean up your data, creating content type, taxonomy and stuff? So what's the procedure you guys going to move on?
One of the, that's a great question, actually. In terms of our methodology and our strategy to take the content that we currently have from the old system into the new system, we have a couple of options that we're tinkering with and we're actually exploring. We have a custom solution that we've been working on, utilizing some libraries like JSON, JSON, some XML, and it's a Java application that kind of targets tags, certain HTML tags. We can sanitize those tags and import it into a flat file database, what have you. That's still a work in progress. But before we even get to that, what we've been doing in the last year or so is we've been running a lot of audit tools to make sure we don't have any broken links, any orphan files out there. We've also been doing things like contacting our different divisions and content providers to find out what content do they need and what do they not need. We're only going to bring over the things that we want used in a new system, so we've been doing that regularly. We've also been working on our site structure, making sure that it's optimal, making sure that things are where they need to be, so that when we're bringing things over, it's as straightforward as possible from a project standpoint.
But you won't be, when you're converting everything over, you're not going to be moving CSS or JavaScript because that's all presentation-based, and Drupal will be doing your presentation. So what you'll be focusing on is the content of your page, along with any files like PDFs, Excel spreadsheets, and images.
Correct, because we are doing kind of same stuff, and that's the hardest part, reaching out to the program people, specific area people, and figuring out their content.
Yeah.
But the people sometimes think just taking the page out from their old website and just putting it in Drupal, which is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to completely, and that's what I was thinking about, what procedure you guys taking. But it seems like you guys doing good. So.
Yeah, and we've reached out to other state entities and other people that's done this before. What we found a lot is that there's either two paths entities are taking. They're either doing a full redesign and saying we're not going to bring our stuff over, per se, so they'll start from scratch and do a redesign, or they are going to bring things over, and then in that case you would have to do the things that we're talking about, utilizing APIs, libraries, or come up with a custom solution. Drupal does have there's a couple of options out there. There's a migrate module that we're looking at. There's also HTML import. Another module is on Drupal.org. You can look at that. That also can assist in bringing at least a good percentage of your stuff over and get you, somewhat there. Then the rest people may have to use your custom solution or another option. So between HTML import, migrate module.
Peer simple or there too.
Yeah, or that's another one.
Or custom web scrapers, which basically just take your content, filter it through, and you get the raw data and just dump the data straight into the database.
I just want to point out that Jeff is in the communications office, and I think the whole agency is really used to looking to communications for having clean communication. And so we're used to working with them, and that makes it, I think, maybe, because where Jeff is positioned, it makes it easier to do that restructuring. Where,
Correct,
Right.
There's already buy-in.
Right.
That's a good thing to do.
We have large divisions. Our local government division is pretty, large. We have operations, we have retirement, we have
No.
Did you,
I see one of them.
did you want me to leave the laptop? Okay.
Anyone wants to move around and get a quick trip outside or anything, feel free. A minute. Turn up.
Okay. Gotcha.
I should have enough juice. That will be done early.
That is kind of cool.
And normal.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how.
This is Wild West, right?
Yeah. I get frustrated over all this, like the reinvention of all this stuff.
Right.
Like, you and I have both been doing this long enough.
I'm going totally paperless, which is very different from me, so hopefully everything is charged. I guess we'll get started in about a minute, just make sure some people can join us again. And also, Courtney pointed out these nice cars. It's nice to see everybody here on such a nice day, too.
Yeah.
Nice, right?
Not had much of those.
I know. Call it off. Will they let you come over to that their frequent? Or is this on your time?
No. You're doing a workshop.
Yeah, they're doing some workshops starting out.
There's a lot of people.
Yeah, no. I should. No. We actually just added the I-5.
Yeah.
Added right 2 weeks ago. The relay. Oh, yeah, the in between.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm going to get started. There might be another person who joins us. Good morning, and thank you, Jeff and Patrick. You guys actually I'm going to build a little bit on some of what you guys said. So, this is a very high-level kind of introduction to Drupal 8 theming, and it's really based on my experiences over the last couple of months working with a great team of people who are getting to experience
experiment and play with Drupal 8. And I know there's some other people in here who are playing with Drupal 8 now, so anyone who wants to add anything, feel free. Also, feel free to ask questions similarly at any point. My name is Meredith Case, as you might have seen, and I also want to highlight that I am an English major and librarian by background, and I did proofread my own intro, so there's at least a couple of grammar and typos, so I apologize in advance. But definitely human. So, first of all, just to kind of set the stage, what do people think of when they think of theming in relation to Drupal or otherwise? Anyone willing to share what theming is to them?
Yeah, so HTML templates, CSS, JavaScript, a little bit of JavaScript, and then SAS.
Yeah. Thanks. Courtney, I saw your hand.
Just the words in my mouth.
Great minds, you know. I just want anything. Anyone wants to?
How are you gonna present your website?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The presentation layer, right? Good old. Sometimes you're working from a Photoshop file or maybe wireframes. It's your interpretation of what is needed to create that interaction layer with visitors and such, and also with your content authors. That's part of it too. So I also kind of see it kind of, especially in the Drupal world, it kind of leads into site building, sometimes what you would call, like how you choose to put things together. So we're going to kind of touch on a few things related to that. So first of all, theming in general, we probably, if you work with theming, you have some different tools, methodologies you like. But how does that apply in the world of Drupal 8? How is Drupal 8 maybe different from Drupal 7? So what can you kind of, some background that can help you get ready for working with Drupal 8? And I think one of the main places to start would be they actually wrote up a CSS architecture document for Drupal 8. And if you visit it, it's got a lot of the theories and fundamentals that are becoming popular or have been popular in working with front-end development. You know, working with CSS, keep your selectors kind of realistic. Let's not have that eon, like 5 selective view thing. Don't rely too much on specific classes to the Drupal world and such. You know, you want to kind of keep it component-based, things that can be reused, keep it scalable. So those are just a lot of the good CSS, good theming front-end fundamentals that they really tried to take to heart when working on Drupal 8. And Drupal 8 theming is really a reimagining of the theming layer for Drupal. So it's kind of exciting and it's kind of weird. But it's great because it's also reaching out. You'll hear in Drupal world that we're on the island. Get off the island. Has anyone heard that? Get off the island. People nodding their head. It's basically Drupal has kind of been its own little world. It's got its Drupalisms. It's got theories, implementation that are become very Drupal specific. With Drupal 8, they're trying to get away from that. And in theming, that's one of the areas. So things like using smacks, people heard of that? It's a theory of scalable and modular architecture of CSS. It's that components idea, and also naming conventions, using them like block element modifier. So you're working based on components and such. So let's get into actually looking at a little bit of that. So how is D8 different from D7? So let's go look at some actual environments. I will like that. So similar to Jeff, I'm using Dev Desktop. Dev Desktop is a great environment to get up and running. You basically download it and you have an environment on your computer, Mac, PC, and you're ready to go. The great thing about it also, let me bring it up. not let me enlarge it though, is that you'll see over here, if you create a new Drupal site, you have distributions to choose from. So you can choose Drupal 7, as Jeff and Patrick did. You can choose Drupal 8 to explore. And also there are some distributions that maybe Drupal 7 at this point, but there's also, they already have a couple of Drupal 8 distributions, which are kind of nice to look at because you can see how they've solved some of the issues around the fact that Drupal 8 is still an evolving platform. There's still a lot of shortfalls in how media is handled, how you can do certain things. So I would recommend, there's Thunder distribution, which is put out by a publishing group in Germany, I believe. And also, there was Lightning here. Lightning, there it is at the very top, which is an Acquia Drupal 8 distribution. So those are both worth looking at because, also as Jeff pointed out, once you download and install it in your dev desktop, you can then see the file structure. You can then see any of the code that they've created to use. So, and we're first going to look at interface. So how is the Drupal theming interface different on D7 and D8? As you can see, the default theme that is applied when you spin up a new site in D7 or D8 is good old Bartik. Just pointed out, it's not too flashy, but it does the job. And we're going to look at appearance again, which is this area. And again, very, very familiar. Anybody notice one thing right off the bat?
Overlay's gone.
The what?
Overlay's gone.
The overlay's gone.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. Because the overlay is gone, that can cause AJAX issues and loading issues. It's just, and also sometimes for the content author, it's just a confusing experience. So you're just within the browser. So we have our appearance. And it's, again, you see Bartik 7. And that's pretty much all you see on a base install. You have some of the similar things. So if you go to settings and D7, you have your good old color picker. These are all options. Also in D8. So the one thing you might notice that's a little different is down at the bottom. This is a D8. You can do a few things here, such as set up the shortcut icon, which is like the favicon. D7. But in D7, there's a few more things. There's things like logo, site name, site slogan. Now, you can turn them on and off, which is great, and they would have by default gone up into the header and stuff. In D8, the cool thing is that they have redone the block structure also. And the block structure is just a lot better because it's now fieldable. So you can do more with a block. You're not just stuck with a title and a text area, essentially. You can add fields to it. You can create custom ones. I'm just going to go quick over to the block area. Now, again, these are all things that I kind of see as in the theme world, ways of interpreting what you're supposed to be sharing with your users in your Drupal structure and setup. So the block area is kind of similar to D7. And I'm using a basic install. You can see over here, that's D7, D8, same thing. The different regions that you might be familiar with if you've worked with subthemes and themes in Drupal before. So the cool thing is that you'll see that up in the header, there's this site branding. I can enlarge it a little. I go instantly into it. The other cool thing is D8. It's a mobile-friendly administrative theme, which is really nice. If you want to edit on the go, you can. So you have a site branding block, and if you go into configure, we actually see our site logo, site name, and slogan here. So you can turn it on and off. You can have different elements display if you want them. If you don't, you can take site logo off, and I go back to the site. I just open it in a new tab. If I hit refresh, the logo should be gone. I'm sorry? And thank you, Ginger. And if you save, it makes a big difference. See, I had to have a couple plants. because people got to keep me honest here. Otherwise, I would have been spinning. There we go. Look at that magic. So it's really easy. And the cool thing is that you could, if you wanted to, for whatever reason, you can reuse blocks. So if you scroll down, again, Justin, Patrick touched on the navigation. You'll see that the main navigation, which you can set up through structure, is in the primary menu region. What if you wanted it someplace else? Before, you would have had to create a custom block. It was kind of a painful process. But if for some reason you actually wanted to put it, let's say, in a sidebar, you can actually go down and see that, oh, look, you can put another instance of it in. So the block interface has just been expanded. It's got a lot of great features that you might want to take into consideration when creating your user interface. So blocks, explore them. They're fieldable. They're awesome. Entities are a wonderful thing. Okay, so that's blocks. And again, any questions? Feel free at any point. So we've those are the highlights of the front end I wanted to talk about. When we were looking at the appearance screen, you'll remember that we only saw in 8, we only saw Bartik and 7 being the administrative theme. Down here, Start, which you can use to help debug code, literally takes out the theme elements so that with no styling, so you can see what's going on with your code. So is that all we get? I mean, Bartik's great, but what do we do if I want to create my own custom theme? So if you actually look at code base, and I'm just going to my dev desktop and clicking the link. Doing something that my computer didn't want to do. I wonder if I can do it from here. Ooh. All right, sorry, I apologize. This is hard to see. There's the Drupal 8 folder structure for this one. It's pretty slim compared to. I'm just clicking on Drupal 7. Instantly, you see it's a lot larger. And as Patrick pointed out, you don't want to do in 7. You don't want to do anything other than touch what's in the site folder. Otherwise, you're hacking core. Kittens will die, as they say. And also, if you have to do a security update, you're in deep trouble, as I think many of us have experienced in the past. In Drupal 8, there is a core folder separately. And actually, at the top level, you'll see there's a modules folder. There's a themes folder. You'll actually be putting your themes and modules in there probably, unless you do a profile, which is a way of grouping a distribution together, let's say. You might put it in there, but you'll probably be actually working within the themes folder or the modules folder, and you'll notice they're pretty much empty. It's a good idea when you're doing things in Drupal to create a custom and a contrib folder. That way you can keep separate those nice modules or themes you download from d.o, drupal.org. Keep them in the contrib folder. Anything custom you do, sub-theming, and such, you would want to put in the custom folder. Just believe me, it'll save you a lot of heartache down the road. Right now I'm going into the core folder, and within that you'll see that these naming conventions are repeated. So once you go into core, you see, oh, themes there. So that you're looking at the themes folder. So there is a nice logic to follow. And when you're in the themes folder of core, you can't probably read it, but you can actually see that there is a lot more than the 3 that we saw through the appearance page. And the 2 that we're mostly thinking of is classy and stable. Now those are themes that are actually built off of core, the core theming level. And that's what makes Drupal 8 really cool, is stable and classy. And what they've done with the theme layer is they've stripped out a lot of the extra div, the dividus, the extra classes and such. And then they've created a very clean base theme called Stable, which classy is actually built on Stable, and which all of your themes you're going to see out there are going to be either built on Stable or classy probably, because You don't want to build straight on core, because core, the theme, they might change it. They might improve it. They want to keep it clean. And stable will always be that buffer to make sure that once they do a core update, your theme doesn't all of a sudden break. So you'll be theming off of one or the other if you decide to do your own theme. And an article that's really great from Lilibot is A Tale of Two Base Themes. It gives a terrific, besides having a lovely picture, a terrific overview of the two base themes, classy and stable. And I will make these links available. I have those organized. But the first thing you might notice here, this is classy markup of a set of fields. Pretty clean, right? I mean, cleaner than you might see in a lot of Drupal installations. If you keep going down, that same information, if you use the stable theme, is this. It's even cleaner. You don't have the classes, but it's pretty darn clean. Now, this is where, if you're doing your own custom theme, you'll probably be playing a lot with Twig, which we'll talk about in a minute, in order to add your own classes so that you can actually do the styling you need to do for your site. So, and this next example is even a bigger highlight. So this is just one field in classy versus stable. So you'll see that it brings in a lot of the field names from when you created that field and other elements, which can be very helpful, but sometimes it's more than you need. So, all right. So that's just kind of a high-level talk about the core themes that you would see within a base install. The stable, classy. Bartik is actually built on top of classy, Stark, and 7. Now, contrib. Now, the question is, what's the state of contrib? Because, of course, D8 is also very recent. We just did 8.1 at the beginning of April. So contrib modules and themes are kind of in their early stage. Now, Foundation and Bootstrap, they already have, they already are up and running. They have Dev and Alpha and pretty active. Actually, they might even be beyond Dev and Alpha. Zen and Omega are Dev and Alpha, and Zen is built on Classic. Now, Foundation and Bootstrap, they might be frameworks you're familiar with, Zerb, or the Bootstrap Foundation from Zerb, and you might love them. And the cool thing about the very clean markup of classy and or stable is that it's very amenable to taking those frameworks and implementing them. So that's why those themes were up and running early, and you can also do that with other frameworks if you really like them. The other thing about contrib modules, Zen and Omega, Zen uses a special framework, layout grid that you might like. Omega, people really like they do a lot with the interface sometimes with the current developer. So those might be things that sell those themes for you. But the cool thing about core, to go back to core and stable and classy, is that they've cleaned so many of the things that made theming in Drupal hard before. There's the template system is a little bit more straightforward. It's a little easier to control the element and the output to the screen as you want it. So you might want to consider doing your own custom theme, which is what we're doing. So what goes into a Drupal theme? We already looked at blocks. We saw the regions. So we're actually, let's go back into the folder structure and look at what makes up a theme. I'm going to go back to core and look at Bartik because that's built on top of Classy. Now, within here, you might not be able to read it, but there's several elements that you'll see in pretty much everything. What you definitely need is the info file. People might be familiar with the info file from D7. It's now an info.yaml file. YAML is, what does it stand for? YAML is not markup language. Or YAML is markup language. It's a self-referential name. What? YAML 8. YAML ain't markup language. Thank you. I knew it was something we call ain't markup language. So it's used by Symfony, which is the PHP framework which is being used in Drupal 8. So all of these technologies relate to each other. Symfony is the basis of the PHP framework for Drupal 8. Twig is a templating engine that is often tied to Symfony, and YAML is also for sharing information. And it's different in what we've been seeing in Drupal 7, and it's part of that getting off the island, getting off of the isolated Drupal 7 world, and using more broadly implemented technologies. So basically, for a theme, you definitely need an info file. This I will enlarge. I can't even read it. I'm standing right over it. And I just typed. So right off the bat, it's very similar to an info file you would have seen in Drupal 7, except they use a colon for the key value pairing. You need to, again, name it. You need to say what type it is. That's a required element now. Base theme, you'll see it's being built on top of classy. Your description that will appear in the appearance section, libraries, and then the regions down here. So you'll see that Bartik has all of these special regions that you can then use to put things like the blocks and such onto the block interface. So you need this info file in order to create your theme. Now, libraries, you might be wondering what is this here actually. In the past, we used those square brackets and such to indicate CSS and stuff. Libraries is another file, a YAML file that you're going to probably have in your theme. And the great thing about it is that you actually can indicate CSS and JavaScript how you need it, how you use it. jQuery by default in V8 is not loaded on every page. You need to call it if you need it somewhere. And that helps your load times, it helps your usage. You can add other JavaScript. It's really up to you. So this libraries doc field, the YAML file, is where you'll be indicating a lot of your CSS and JavaScript. So within your theme folder, you'll probably also have a theme file, which kind of essentially takes the place of your template.php file. Some themers get into creating those pre-processed things that they take a chunk of code and they go through it and they add things to it as you want. You can do that in D8, obviously, and you're going to be doing it in a .theme file. Now, you might not have to, because what we're going to talk about next quickly is twig structure. And the twig structure is basically your templates. And the templates are very easy to look at, to use, and they allow you to dig into a lot of the control you need over your HTML. So the other cool thing that is in code is a file called your breakpoints file, YAML breakpoints. So this is where you would indicate your breakpoints, your overall breakpoints for your site, like how you want, what width you want your mobile, your tablet, your desktop, let's say, on. And this can be then used by the Drupal core or any of the contributed modules in order to have that responsive experience for your end users. So in this case, what we've been using it for is, or what we plan to be using it for, is now in Drupal 8, the pictures module. Anyone familiar with the pictures module, responsive images? So pictures module and responsive images were built for Drupal 8, and they've been backported to Drupal 7. So even if you're working in Drupal 7, you might want to check out pictures and responsive images, because These all work with the image styles within Core that you might be familiar with. Image styles is where you can indicate when someone uploads an image to a content type. As Jeff and Patrick were illustrating before, you create fields and you can create a field where you can image, let's say. Let's say someone uploads those nice grandiose 2,000 by 3,000 pixel images, right? You don't want that showing up on your computer, on someone's computer. So in image styles, you can indicate that for that field, what's going to be displayed in the display portion is like a 500 by 500 image, right? So you can create various image styles that can then work with a picture module and responsive images to say that at this viewpoint, at a module viewpoint, take the image at a 200 by 200 size. So then it's only loading the smaller 200 by 200 image. It's not just squeezing it down based with CSS. So it keeps the load time for a mobile tablet and desktop appropriate to the person's viewpoint. So breakpoints, it's a great tool. You probably want to look into it. Some of the other basic ones, screenshot. Again, so in the appearance page, you can get a slight idea of what the theme is going to look like when implemented. So this is a small screenshot of Bartik. You could put your logo in here. Now these folders, the ones you're probably most likely to have are images, so images that are related specifically to your theme. You'll want to put them in that folder. CSS, if you're doing straight CSS, which is coming back into Vogue, so you could do that, or you could have a Sass folder that then outputs to a CSS folder, and templates folder. And this is where you would put any template, any Twig template that will override Core. So Bartik is built on it. So by default, Bartik is going to be using any of Classy's templates. So if you go to, I'm in the Classy folder now, if you go into the templates folder, you'll see that there's a lot of subfolders labeled block, content, dataset field. These are all filled with Twig templates that are then accessible to your theme if you're building on top of Classy, which Bartik is. So in Bartik, you'll notice that within the templates folder, it's got about a dozen or so templates here. These are instances where they are overriding what the core, what Classy's templates are doing. So they wanted to add some special functionality to it. So before we get into that, what is Twig? Twig is basically it's the theme engine. In D7, the theme engine was something called PHP template. And PHP template is actually in Drupal 8 if you want to use it. So it kind of takes your data, it takes the templates, it mixes them together through the template engine, and you get your HTML output on the screen. Right. So how is Twig different? Twig is very different in a couple of ways. It's way more secure. In D7, you could actually literally put in your template DB query drop table, and it would drop your database. So by data. So you can't do that in Twig. In Twig, you can do certain things. You'll see syntax like this: the double curly brackets. That's basically a variable output, like let's say your field. And then you could have something with percentages that is going to be more executing a statement. So you do have some logic that is available to you in the Twig template system. And then this last one is basically just a comment, a good old pound hash for comments. They're definitely more secure. And it's intimidating because you might be thinking, what the heck is this Twig stuff? Why do I have to learn another thing? The nice thing about Twig is besides those basic three indicators, it's going to be HTML. It's going to be very familiar to you. So Twig is it's pretty straightforward, and I'm going to open up the classy template content layout. HTML Twig. This is basically the highest up you can get. This is the Twig file that affects a whole page. And if you look in here, you'll see that there's your HTML, your head, title. It's going to do insert the CSS. Then you have your body, and you see in the double curly brackets of page and page top and stuff, that's just going to be calling other Twig templates. So it's kind of nesting of templates. So how do you know what template you want to use? Let's say that you're creating your own theme and you actually want to control something on, let's say, your article content type. Well, you could just guess. You could start going through the template files and looking at them. But the cool thing about Twig is that there's this thing called Twig Debug, and I think at least a few people have heard of Twig Debug. It's a really terrific tool. So I'm still in my Drupal 8 code base. I'm actually going into Sites, Default, and you'll see here that there's a default services YAML file. Again, the services YAML file is going to have information about how to run certain things. So first I'm going to copy it. I'm going to actually do a Command-C, Command-V, and since this is a system, it's asking me to say, you really want to do that? So what I'm doing is I'm creating a services.yaml file instead of a default. And when I open it, a lot of information about how your site should run, but basically you'll see this one area called Twig Config and Twig Debug. And in the resources I have put links to stuff about this, but basically by default it's false. You don't want this running on your production server. You don't want a bunch of comments inserted into your HTML output. So, but locally, if you type true, auto reload, it's always been true. Cache, false is the ideal. Save that. Now I'm going back to the browser, and this is my Drupal 8 site before hitting refresh. I did save. I remember to hit save that time, but I haven't refreshed. So I'm going to do a quick inspect element, our good old buddy Firebug inspect element. And if you look at it, first of all, it's pretty clean divs for Drupal, period. But you'll notice that it's pretty straightforward. It's just divs, classes and such. All right. So then when I refresh, oh, nothing happens because what do we like to do often?
Clear cache.
Clear cache. So you'll want to clear cache. You can do that through the appearance interface. The other cool thing about Drupal or Aqua Dev Desktop, this icon over here is going to take you to your command line. So you can also do a drush CR, which is the new, it's not CC in D7, it's CR in D8. But basically all it does is it clears your cache. You wait a few seconds because you're staring at it. So now when I hit refresh on my page, we see some cool green stuff. And I'm actually going to So if you look here, there's a lot of nice information. So just by turning that on, you get to see what templates are outputting what to your screen. So as we're looking at HTML, obviously that's at the top, and that is the little X indicates that's what's being used currently. And then these are suggestions. These are hints at what template or what files you might want to create. So anyone want to guess how you would create one? Let's say you wanted to override your front page to your site. Anyone want to?
Just a wild guess. Would I make a copy of the HTML front YAML?
The Twig file.
Twig file?
Yeah,
Yep.
they're similar, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, yes. We go into core, grab that HTML.twig, make a copy of it, and then where do we put it? we keep it in core?
No, you
Themes
put it in
folder,
themes folder,
yes,
yeah.
incorrect. Yes, we don't want to put things in core, so we would just take a copy, put it in our themes folder. If you wanted if you want to override the general layout of all of your HTML pages, you could then just leave it HTML.html because it would pick that one first because it's within your theme. But since we were talking about the front page, we would rename it html-front.html.twig, and it would override what is on the home page. So as you can see, if you go down through which ones are actually currently being used, toolbar, and what ones you could use. You could have things node specific. Ideally you wouldn't because that could bite you in the butt later. But let's look at an actual twig file because I think we're doing Bartik. Now, the sub-theme, I would have actually gone into, I'm at the doc root, in the themes folder, I would create custom theme. Now let's say that I wanted to adjust Bartik. We don't want to do it in here. And ideally, you probably wouldn't do it this way either. I'm copying Bartik, putting it in my custom themes folder. In order for it to really work, you would, in your info file, you would be overriding it and such. I don't know if this is even going to work. This is called on the fly. I'm going to open the page.html template because I'm already editing it. So this doesn't have any of the instances I wanted to. I'm actually going to go into a current Drupal 8 site that we're working on. I'm looking at Ryan. I'm going to just pull up an example file to show one more thing about about twig templates, which is really neat. And I'm still learning, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. I'm opening, this is a field level twig template. And you can see, and this is where kind of going back to, remember we were talking about SMACs and BEM and some of those web thought processes. You can see in the naming convention that that's kind of part of it. So when you're naming things, you want to think about that block level and get down to more specificity that helps organize. So at this point, since it's field level, there's a lot of the statement-based twig things. So it's basically looping through any instances of this field. And what you can do with twig is up here at the top is you can set variables. So what we're doing right now is creating classes. And what we want to do is for every instance of a class, every instance of a field, we want to add a CSS class to it so that it's able to be themed. And the reason we're doing that is our theme is built off of stable, so there really aren't very many classes in there. So we need things to be able to grab onto and create your Sass and CSS for it. So at this top, what it is it's basically saying, okay, we're going to actually we're going to create classes called keypoint dash dash, and then this concatenates the field name. This keeps it a clean class. If you see a pipe, this is a filter in Twigs. It allows you to create filters to make sure that you have like clean strings or things different. You could do time formatting and things of that nature. So basically what it does is it goes through and it creates fields. And we have down here the one other thing you have to do is you'll notice that within this div, you have the double curly brackets, so that means that it's a variable. It's going to output something to the screen. And what it's going to do is add classes. And it's going to output this classes variable that we indicated up here. So it's going to go through, and for each item, and in this case for each key point field, it will create that and then add the name of the field and its interval output. So while Twig files keep you safe from being able to directly affect databases and such, it does allow you to take those fields and manipulate them and get the kind of output you may want in order to style the page you need it. So Twig debug is really important. There's also something called Kint, K-I-N-T, which is really cool because then you can actually help you find the variables that are available to a particular page. You have to install the Devel module and such in order to get that, but it's definitely worth looking into. In my base install, I don't have that. And honestly, those are the highlights of what I see as Drupal 8 being kind of different from Drupal 7, some of the elements. And in the document that I created for this presentation, I do have links to any of the resources I've already referenced, and I will talk to Eric to make sure that I get those someplace that people can see them if they're curious. It links from everything from some of the standards that are being used in the thought process of setting up the Drupal 8 theme structure to some of the great presentations, because Drupal 8 is really new. There's not a lot of documentation out there, but there's starting to be some great presentations, including from the DrupalCon just the other week. And everything down to something called, I even included a link to style guide driven development, and that's how I'm gonna wrap this around to my own experience, because this is based on what we've been learning as we've been working with Drupal 8, and one of the things that we've been doing is doing style guide driven development. Has anyone heard about that, or does anyone do it, kind of? Okay, so the theory behind that, and at least the way we're approaching it, and there's a variety of ways, is again, you're creating components. Let's say you're creating a header, you're creating a slideshow, you're creating a list of elements, you're creating something called like a featured card that highlight information. So you want that HTML to be clean and component-based, as well as the CSS. So there is a style guide that lives within our code base that whenever we make a change to the SAS files, it also updates the style guide. And we just make sure that the style guide is populated with clean HTML, and it helps us keep the Twig file output clean too, because we then test it in the style guide environment. And it's both a reference for ourselves and in the future, the site owners and content authors and site builders. But it's also a way of just testing to make sure that we're doing things. So that's how we're trying to keep things clean and component-based and be able to build on things as they're created. Questions? Comments? Because I know we've got a few.
Can you show the style guide? Do you have that?
Sure. Let me see if I have it up and running, because that would be. I have my virtual. So I was using Aqua Dev Desktop to display today. We also, there's a couple of other ways of creating environments. You could use MAMP stacks, WAMP stacks, Windows. You can also, popular these days, is virtual machines, and there's a Drupal VM that is very powerful. So that's what we're doing. And the question is, good question. Thank goodness. I'm glad that Chrome is smarter than me. Remembers things better. So this is our living style guide as it exists. It's not perfect. It's, as in all agile development elements, it's iterative and a work in progress. The home page, that's the first page, we tried to keep it theory, and I have to update this because it changed. And then if you click, oh, that's right, overview, the URL changed. You can see some of the different elements in their own in process. So this is the HTML. You'll see that we're aiming for clean, so it's just block quote with a P within it, and then this is what the styling brings to it. Headings. We haven't really done ordered lists much. Color and font, I kind of tried to add a palette for reference. Fonts in usage. Components. This is where you start seeing some of the different elements. It's still button styles. Again, a lot of times if you take a component inventory of your website or of existing sites, you'll find that there are hundreds or dozens at least of button styles. So how does that help the user experience? You know, and also your own sanity, trying to keep track of things. So the nice thing about style guides is that you should be able to reference everything that you have available to you, and so that you can reuse it.
So now this is generated automatically by gulp by gulp anytime your CSS changes, right?
Correct. So there is some behind-the-scenes magic, which is basically a gulp file that takes the SAS file, it compiles it, and it outputs it to both the CSS that is sent along with the code base up to production servers or development servers, and also creates the style guide CSS. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
Meredith, have you worked with Drupal console yet at all?
Drupal console. Excellent question. A little. I think it's amazing. I used it. I did a module, and I used it to create the bare bones outline of the module, and it's terrific. Now, Drupal console is, gosh, so it kind of works alongside Composer and things. It's new. It only works with Drupal 8, I think. And it's just a terrific command line tool to help you start a module, update a module. It's just, it's got a lot of, I follow them on Twitter, these guys, there's 4 guys who are just doing amazing things with it. But if you have anything else to add, Roxanne, about related to it.
I know we have videos on it. I know you do some of the
Yeah. And a lot of camps have had presentations on it, and I'm sure DrupalCon did too. So I would highly recommend people watching them because it saves so much effort and time, and it also creates like the structure correctly. You know, so it gives you less opportunity to mess up.
great debugging tool.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
What is it called? Sorry.
Drupal console.
Anybody know when the DrupalCon videos are going to be coming out?
They're out.
Are they already?
Yeah, I've already been watching them, and that was Eric said we need to share something that we like, and I highly recommend going to DrupalCon New Orleans. If you go to the conference site, if you go to the schedule section, you actually can see the description of the session and then the videos embedded, so you can watch it right there. And they also have a YouTube channel, but it's kind of nice to see the description, and then you can decide if you want to watch the video. Morton DK, I would highly recommend his. He has been very involved in the Drupal theme development. He is something to behold. He's got a great presentation style, and he presented at DrupalCon with some really interesting ideas. Some may or may not be applicable to what you want to do. He also kind of took the components-based idea further. If you probably couldn't really see it, but if you do look at a Drupal 8 theme folder at the templates, it's grouped by usually layout and other things. But he said, well, why not group those template files that you create by component? So kind of continuing this component theme, like you might create your SAS partials as component level, which is what we do with the style guide, and style guides laid out component level, and then also your template files could be component level too. So it's kind of a way to organize. Anything else? Oh, it's 11:02, but
What was that virtual
machine? There, it's Drupal VM. It's done by a guy named Jeff Geerling. He works at Acquia. And honestly, if you're working with Acquia, they might introduce you to something called Bolt, B-O-L-T, that I think they just open sourced. And that uses Drupal VM with some special tweaks to create a local development environment. Anything else? Okay, thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Okay. So, thank you to our presenters. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
So we're running out of time, but really quick, picks of the month. I'll start it off. Gift box. It's really cool. It's an awesome way to organize and share code and collab with your team. It's in the cloud, so you can access it anytime, anywhere. Box uses GitHub's backend, but adds some layer of label and search functionality. So some cool features are it updates in real time. So if, say, Jane makes a change to jQuery snippet and John wants to access it, he can see it the moment she updates it. So that's cool. Snippets can be private. If you want to keep it just to yourselves and you don't want to share, you can do that. It's in the cloud. So if you had it on your desktop and you deleted it, it's gone forever, but in the cloud, it's there for all the time. It's searchable. If you want to find something that was just, CSS and not PHP, you can search for, CSS. It offers labels. You can organize all your snippets to CSS, PHP, or what's for dinner tonight. So I've used it. I've used it for like JavaScript and jQuery. It's really great. Instead of having to write like a whole blurb of code again, it's right there. So I can just take it, modify it to what I need, and it's a really cool tool. So that's JustBox. If you want the URL, it's justboxapp.com. So check it out. Anybody else have some cool picks for the month? Anybody? DrupalCon videos. You want to talk about DrupalCon videos quick?
Beyond what I said now, it's every topic you might be interested in is there.
Anybody else? Nobody's got a cool tool? Okay, well, maybe next meeting. So, Eric had asked me to say, we're looking for dream presenters. We need people with site building expertise to give a site building overview, also maybe a roundtable discussion or a panel. If you're interested, please contact Eric Steinborn, eric.steinborn@ag.ny.gov, or you can contact me, Courtney.jordan@its.ny.gov. Thank you all for coming, and have a nice day.